Good evening, class. Welcome to our presentation on using Qt. This evening, I just want to go through a coding example and setting up a project with Qt. Then we can also have a closer look at exercises 1 and 2, and hopefully we don't have the same problems that we had last night. Unfortunately, the usual problems with Teams is I've got no idea what you can see. So can somebody please confirm what's on screen? You should hopefully be seeing Qt.
Yes, we can see Qt.
Okay, good. That's a good start. All right, are there any questions before we get going? Okay, just one other thing. There will be a presentation tomorrow. We'll be doing the part that we should have done yesterday with libraries and design patterns, same time. But then, okay, I'm going to start with Qt. Guys, please understand I'm doing this off the cuff. There's no script, so Murphy's Law probably applies. So be gentle if something doesn't quite go as expected. But anyway, let's go. Okay, we have... Okay, sorry, I'm going to look at two screens at once. I'm not sure what you're referring to about downloading the shared files. Can you clarify that, please? Okay, we'll come back to that. All right, setting up a new project. If you've already been using Qt, you get to the screen. When you first boot up, you get a slightly different screen where you have the choice of new and existing project and that. But anyway, from this screen, we go up to File, and the new file or project, and we get to here. Okay, now, the easiest way to set up a project where you're coding your own GUI is, in fact, to set up a console application. Because if you go for a widgets application, it assumes that you're going to be using Qt Design, and it puts in all those UI pointers and a whole lot of other stuff. And it actually takes a bit of effort to get rid of that. So it's far easier just to start with a console application, which is virtually a clean application and nice and neat and tidy. So you select Qt application and then Qt console application. We're going to give this a name. I'm just going to call it test 1, something nice and simple. And then I'm going to find somewhere to store it. I did actually set up a directory beforehand, which is something I suggest you do, particularly when you're doing things like the exercises or your assignments, to set up a directory structure beforehand where you can find it easily. Just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so we've called our project test 1, and I'm creating it there in a directory where I can find it nice and easily. Then we go to next. Okay, build system. This is quite important. See, you can choose between qMake and CMake here. Always choose qMake, please. We're still using qMake this year. Next year, we'll go to CMake. They both do the same thing, but their project file is quite different. So you must choose qMake as your build system, please. Okay, we're not doing translations, so we'll just leave that. Okay, this is where I've got multiple versions of Qt installed, so I can choose between them. Notice there I can choose 5.15, various versions of it. I can find, there, I've got Qt 6 selected, but you can select, so if you've got multiple versions installed, you can use, select any one of them. So I'm going to be doing this using Qt 6. And then project management thing, we don't need to do anything, so we finish. And then we get a basic console application. Now, as I said, we're actually doing a GUI application, so we can't do a GUI application the way it is. We've got to make a small little change. And what we do, you go to the project file, and you've got to add in a line here. It's Qt, capital letters, plus equals widgets. We're just telling our build system that we're going to be using widgets. And that's all you have to do. You now have an application that you can use widgets in. Then the other thing we want to do, we go to main. Okay, because we're using widgets, Q core application is no longer of any use to us. We've got to use Q application. So you just change this to Q application. And you'll see you start getting errors. So what you're going to do to fix that is you select build from the menu at the top and you run qMake. That's our build system. It's because we've edited our project file. And if we do that, these error messages go away eventually. Okay, there, now you see we set up. Right, so this is the basic setup of using a console application and then converting it into a GUI application. We are now at the stage where we can start adding our classes to the application. Are there any questions so far? Everyone with us on setting up a project? Okay, we are now going to add a class to our application. So we go up here onto the project name, right click, add new, and the default here is a C++ class, which is exactly what we want. So we just select that. Just to keep it easy, I'm going to give it a nice simple name, but remember you must give your classes meaningful names. And just remember the convention, class names start with a capital letter. Everything else starts with a lowercase. So that's how you distinguish a class name generally from other names. Class names start with a capital letter. Okay, now this following part here is optional because everything you do here, you can actually code directly into your application, into the class when it opens. But this makes life a bit easier, so let's use it. Okay, we're not using a custom-based class. We're going to inherit Q widget because we want all that functionality. We want a window that we can add widgets to. And you'll notice it includes Q widget for us. And then the other thing here we need, which it's kindly done for us, adding Q object macro. And we need that because, excuse me, we want to use signals and slots in our application. And then it gives names for your header and source file. You just leave those alone. You don't touch anything else. Okay, so all we've done here basically is to set up inheritance with a base class of Q widget, and we've added the Q object macro. As I say, both of those you could actually have just written the code into your application. This is just a slight shortcut, and it does it all for you, so you might as well use it. Let me just go to next, and we don't need to change anything more here. And you'll get that warning briefly while it does what it has to do. And right, there's our header file, all neatly set up for us. You see it's included Q widget, which you had to do. It's done the public inheritance. It's added our Q object macro. Oops, and it's done our constructor for us. Okay, so now we need to add a few things. Right, we're going to need okay, we're not going to be putting in any signals of our own, but we will be adding some private slots eventually. I'll come back to that. And then we're going to have some private members in our class. And the first one is to set up our GUI. It's always better to use a method for that so you don't clutter up your constructor. And particularly when you get onto, as we will in a few exercises down the line, use a main window. There's a whole lot of initialization you've got to do, like setting up toolbar, set up menu, set up status bar, set up actions. It's far better to put a little private method in your constructor and then put all the code, say for a menu, all in one place away from the constructor. Otherwise, your constructor ends up with a huge, big, long thing full of all kinds of stuff, and it's very difficult to read. If you just use methods, you can see exactly what your constructor is doing, and it's neat and tidy and easy to read, and every bit of functionality separated out by itself, and it's easy to work on and maintain and so on. So we're going to have a void setup GUI. Then we're going to be using a line edit and a text edit and some push buttons. Now, generally, we are only going to declare pointers for those in our header. So you don't need to include the full library. The problem is if you include a full library up at the top here and then you include this header into another header, that full library gets included again. And if that gets included into something else, then everything gets included there again. So we use what we call a forward declaration. You just say it's a class and you say Q line edit class Q text edit. Microphones off, please. Class QPU. Okay, there's our forward declarations. What we are basically saying to the compiler is just hang on. We're going to be using these classes later in our application, but we don't need the full declaration of them now. We're just basically telling you that we are going to be using them a little bit later. And then you do the full include in your source file. There's an interesting article on Stack Overflow about this. A guy wrote an article. They obviously work on a very big application. And he said it made a difference of about an hour in the compilation time by using forward declarations instead of includes in the header files. Because as I said, putting includes adds a big overhead. And if you're just declaring pointers, you don't actually need any of that in your header file. So you use forward declarations. Okay, Mornay's question, can you do forward declaration on all Q libraries and custom libraries? Yes, you can, but it's only basically if you're declaring pointers. You can't, if you're using it as an argument in one of your methods, then you can't do a forward declaration. Then you need the full declaration. So it's most often when you're using pointers. Otherwise, you can try it. You'll just get an error and say that the class wasn't declared or something. That's how you actually find out if it works. Okay, let's.
Arnott?
Yeah.
If I may ask, the forward declaration, is it the same as like when we declare a global variable?
No. It's a replacement. Instead of at the code here, we have said include Q widget. Very often you put here include Q line edit, but you don't need to do the include. All you're saying is you're declaring that you're going to be using a Q line edit.
Okay.
So it's an alternative to the include statement.
All right.
And then here a note on coding conventions. Okay, I use a convention of using 3 characters in front to say what the object is and then a name to describe what it does. I just want to emphasize that there's no prescription on what naming conventions you must use. You can use anything sensible. In fact, you'll notice when you get the solutions to assignments, you'll see Dr. Pilkington actually uses a suffix after the name. So you can use any naming convention you like, but just use something sensible that describes what the object is. When I look at this now, I know immediately that it's a line edit, and I know more or less what it does. It's input. Oops. Okay, hopefully from that, what I hope is a sensible name, you can see immediately what the intention of that text edit is. What should we call it? Process. Okay, there's most of it. Then the other thing we're going to do, we're going to need a slot, which is going to be void RACE process input. Okay, that should be most of our declarations in our header file, if I've done that correctly. Are there any questions on that so far? Reasonably clear what's going on? Okay, then we'll move into our source file. Okay, this now is where I've got to do the full includes. Edit, include, include, okay, those are the ones we've declared so far. Then I'm going to come on to something slightly different now. I'm going to be setting up the GUI, but I'm also going to be using a layout, and I'm going to be using labels, which I'm going to include here. Now, the reason I didn't put these on the in the header file is because I don't need class scope for them. They are only going to be called from the setup GUI method, so I don't need to give them class scope. Local scope is quite sufficient. And then I'm just going to use a simple UV box layout. Okay, that's our declarations. Then, okay, this part of the constructor with that colon there, this is known as the initialization section. And this is where you need to do the initialization of the members that you've declared in the header. If you don't initialize your pointers here in particular, your program will generally crash. Then the other thing is you must do it here in the same order that you've declared them in your header file. Otherwise, you'll keep on getting warnings about object B will be initialized before object A, that kind of stuff. So you must put the order here correctly. Otherwise, you will get warning. Notice the separator here is a comma and not a semicolon. Process QP push button. Sorry guys, it seems as though I don't get that comment. Why do you want to switch off my mic? How can that be distracting? Okay, when you declare these push buttons, you'll notice if you look at code examples, you will often see this pointer included afterwards. You don't need to do that here because we're going to be including these into a layout, and the layout will take care of that, and I'll speak more about that when we get further down. Okay, hopefully that's everything we need there. Then we need to
sorry, but Fernand?
Yes.
Sorry. Do I have to make these declarations of these pointers in this format that you've done here?
How else do you want to do then?
Because in the previous subject, the prerequisite, like your QLine edit, I'll just say QLine edit, and then I put an entry seq on top, and then I give it a name, let's say A, and then I say equal to, and then I say new, and then QLine edit, open and close bracket.
No, sorry, I'm just going back to the header file. We've already declared our pointer to the QLine edit.
Okay.
We want to make it a class member, so it's got class scope, so it's declared in the header file. And then in our source file, we're just going to call new because the pointer already exists at this stage.
Okay.
We've already got a pointer. Now we want to initialize it with a value.
Okay. Okay.
Another question here, sir.
Carry on.
In fact, two questions. One, the first question is the includes on the implementation file. Must you put this, because I believe this code will still compile even if you didn't put those includes, except for include the header.
Sorry?
The includes above the constructor.
Yes.
Must you put this in this file?
Yes.
Because I believe the code will still compile even if you did not put this.
No, the code will tell you that you've got an unknown class or something to that effect. You have to include all the classes that you're going to use in your application.
Yes, but I mean, if you add them on the header file, then on the implementation file, it's not necessarily the case.
Okay, I'm sure I have just recently explained about forward declarations and why you shouldn't put the includes in the header file.
Okay. Maybe I joined later.
Okay, you must use forward declarations wherever possible if you're only using pointers, because you don't instantiate objects there, so you don't need the full class declaration. It's just a very unnecessary overhead in your header file, and the problem is if this header file gets included into another file, then all that overhead goes with it. So you just do a forward declaration to say you are going to be using a QLine edit, and then in your source file you actually include it, and you're now including it when you actually are going to use it.
All right, that makes sense then.
Okay.
Then the other one is the initialization of these pointers.
Yes.
Since you have the setup UI, is it necessary for you to initialize them here instead of the setup UI function?
It's not impossible to do it there. It would probably work, but there's an initialization section in the constructor for a reason, and that's where your class members should be initialized. In your setup GUI, I think you should only do initialization of the local members. But your class members that need class scope, you should do in the initialization section of the constructor. That's the right place to do it. And so it will work if you put it into one of your methods, but the correct place is the initialization section of the constructor.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, then we're going to put some stuff. One thing you should generally do is put some comments into your code so that somebody who's not familiar can see what's going on. Okay, in this case, it's actually obvious because our method name tells us what we're doing, but comments are generally good. Okay, at this stage, we should be able to check if everything's all right. So it's a good idea to run your compiler quite frequently because your compiler will find errors much quicker than you do. So it's an easy way of checking. So let's just see if everything is correct so far. It's obviously not going to show much because our setup GUI method is empty at this stage. Seems to be taking very long for such a simple. Okay, there you are. So everything is good so far. It's blank, obviously, because there is nothing in here. Then at this stage, you could put this next bit in the setup GUI, but I, for some reason or other, prefer to do it here. So window title ESTRNG. And then you can also do things like set minimum size and its width times height. So those are just a few things. Then the next thing I'm going to do here, I'll come back to this. And this is something you can do in your setup GUI method. I prefer to put it up here because it's something you tend to come back to while you're coding your application, whereas the setup GUI method is basically once off code. And I usually push that right down to the bottom because once you've set up your GUI, you generally don't need to go back to it again. But it's optional, as there's signals and slots you could put up in setup GUI if you prefer. Okay, now setting up the GUI part, and this is the part about doing layouts. Now I've chosen vertical box layouts simply because they're very easy to use. You just add widgets and they stack up one under the other. You can also use a horizontal box layout and just put them in a line next to each other. But I just want to make it clear that these aren't the only layouts in town. There's a form layout and a grid layout, which you must have a look at. I've put the links in the exercises. Their use is very similar. With the form layout, you just add two items, a label and a widget at the same time. And with the grid layout, you have to specify a row and a column. And then you can place things in a grid. And you can also set things up to span multiple rows and or columns. So please do have a look at form layout and grid layout. I'm just using the simplest layout here. But as I said, you must look at those other ones. Okay. QV box layout. New QV box layout. Okay, then at this stage, I'll come back and explain about this this pointer. Okay. Right, so there I've declared a pointer to my layout and I've initialized it. Okay. Now I'm going to declare some labels here and I'll tell you why I'm doing it here. Why I'm declaring these here within the setup GUI method is because this is the only place in the application that I'm going to be using layouts and inputs. So they don't need class scope, they only need local scope. All the setting up of using layouts and labels is going to be done within this method. So we don't need to access them from anywhere else. So we can use local scope for these. So the names I'm choosing are similar to the names that I've used for the widgets that they're going to be labels for. Notice these names I'm putting are probably not necessarily the best names. You must choose something sensible, but I'm just doing. Okay, so now we've got everything set up. We've got all our class widgets and objects set up in the constructor. We've now declared a layout, and we've declared some local labels. So now we start putting it all together, and all you have to do is say layout, add widget, and the first one we're going to add is that label input, and then we're going to say, oops, fat fingers, layout, add widget, and we're going to add the edit input. And then we'll say layout, add widget, and we're going to add the label. Notice these are just stacking up one on top of the other. And this was it. I don't know what does that. No, we've got one too many. Okay, then let's just see how we're doing so far. And there is our display. So you notice how the vertical box layout just puts everything one on top of the other in the order that we entered them. So far, so good.
And where did we add the layout to the widget? I don't see that code.
Okay, I'm going to explain that part now. Just hang in there. We'll get there shortly. Then I'm just going to add the two buttons. Add widget button process. And layout. Add widget. And there, our basic layout is done. Okay, the compiler seems very slow when you're busy watching it. Okay, and there we've got everything. Notice all the widgets have been added exactly in the order in which they were added to the layout. And of course, the buttons don't do anything at this stage because we haven't. Okay, that last question. What you would often get here is called the set layout method. It's a layout. Why is it doing that? Set layout. Okay, does that answer the question that was asked? Okay, set layout is a method of Qt Widget.
Yes.
Now, basically, when you call set layout, you're setting the layout, which was the VBox layout that we declared. You're setting it, making it a child of the widget. And that is the composite pattern at work. Once you make our layout a child of the widget becomes responsible for the life cycle of our layout. And the widget will then destroy all the pointers that we've added, made as children at the appropriate time. And this is the reason you'll notice in this application, which I'm surprised nobody asked about, we declared a whole lot of pointers in our header file, and I didn't declare a destructor. whenever you use pointers, you should always have a destructor so that you can release the heap memory. But due to Qt's parent-child relationship and the implementation of the composite pattern, when we make our pointers basically children of the widget is the parent, and the parent then becomes responsible for the destruction of all its children. So the widget will, in fact, delete all the pointers at the appropriate stage. However, there is something wrong with this code. It won't actually cause an error, but we've done the same thing twice. By setting our layout using this pointer, we've made it the child of the widget. And all our other widgets that we declared, we've added them to the layout. And by doing that, adding this pointer here makes the layout the child of the widget. And layouts operate slightly strangely. By adding widgets to the layout, we don't in fact make them children of the layout. The layout is sort of invisible. They actually become children of the widget that the layout is a child of. So the layout is a sort of intermediary that doesn't really participate totally in this whole process. So just remember that. By adding widgets to a layout, you're actually making those widgets the child of the main widget, not of the actual layout. But to get back to the point, putting this pointer on the end of our layout, we've made it a child of the widget, but by setting the layout to layout, which it's the same layout, it's also making it a child of the widget. So you don't need both of those. So in fact, I can take out this pointer over here. And hopefully it will still run. So you see it still works. So using this pointer in your layout or by setting layout is two different ways of achieving the same thing. You don't need to do them both. You only need to do the one. And so it doesn't cause an error, but it is actually a duplication. So any questions so far? Okay, person with your hand up, ask.
I just want to clarify, is there any difference between the declarations of saying, say, QV box layout and in brackets new QV box layout and equals new box layout?
In terms of end result, no, there's no difference. But there is actually a big difference in the amount of processing. By doing it the way I've done it, you're actually calling the constructor of that pointer. So it's getting instantiated basically and initialized at the same time. If you use assignment, then you call the constructor and you get default initialization. And then immediately the assignment calls the copy constructor and assigns it a value. So it's actually double the amount of processing. So by initializing through the constructor is much more efficient than trying to initialize by using assignment. But the end result is the same.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, right, next step. Okay, here's the tricky bit. We'll connect some signals and slots. I remember connect is a method of QObject. Yeah, ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Can you speak up a bit, please? I've turned my volume down. Apparently, that's the way to sort out the echo problem.
Not a problem. Just my question is on my side. Well, when I actually did the exercise one, I put this as a parameter in QVBox layout and QLabel and QLabel as the second parameter on the QLabels. Well, not QLabel, but on my side, I've got the QPush button. I've got that as the second parameter. Would that also need to be done on this side as well? And what is the benefit to having it or not?
No, it serves no purpose, because by adding your button to the layout, it becomes the child of the widget. If you put this pointer there, this is pointing to the same widget, so you're doing the same thing twice. Adding it to the layout is sufficient. You don't need to call this.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, connect. Let's hope I remember how to do this. Okay, we want to connect our button, what is it called, process. It's a Q button. This is our sender, and we want to call it click method. Yeah, that's all you have to do. Right, there's two ways of doing connecting signals and slots. The old one you're calling the signal and slot macro, or this newer way. You can use either. It doesn't make any difference. Then I'm calling something in this, which is test, and it's process input. There, hopefully, we've got our. I know what I did wrong. It's got to be a pointer, a reference. Right? Can I take this? What have I done wrong?
The parentheses, you've got open and close brackets.
Oh, yes. Obvious mistake. Okay, well spotted. Yes. Those are tricky things to find. I'm glad you spotted that. Okay, then we've got a close button, so we want to connect that as well. Close. Also a Q push button. I've done the same thing again to last week. Okay, picked. It needs to be a reference. Then we're going with this. Okay, now we want to a button close to close our application. When we click it, as it turns out, Qt Widget has got a closed slot, so we're going to use that. Right, hopefully our signals and slots are working. Let's just check that. As I say, it's a good idea to compile frequently because then you basically find errors as they occur. If you sort of code the whole application and you compile and you sort of find 10 errors or so, then it's very hard to find them. Whereas if you do it incrementally, bit by bit, you always know that your code is basically correct up to a certain point. Okay, the only process I'm going to work out, close, should hopefully close the application, and it does. Okay, so our signals and slots are now connected. Are there any questions about signals and slots? And just remember this connect method, it's a method of QObject. And the reason we can just call it here like that is because QWidget inherits QObject. So we've got all the facilities of QObject available to us.
I've got a bit more of an advanced question. If we're dealing with multiple widgets, how would we determine if we're closing the application or we're closing just the widgets at hand?
Because we are specifying which one we're referring to, this pointer, that is our application, our main widget window. If you were pointing to other widgets, you would call them by name, like we have here, button close or button process. So you specify exactly which one you are referring to.
So closing this widget, does that also close the application?
Yes, because this is our application. That's the main window of the application. By closing that, that's the big daddy. And then when you close that, that destroys everything else within it because everything has been set as a child of our main widget.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, let's now see if we can do process input. Okay, basically what I want to do is to write something into our input and then display it in the display. So it's a very simple thing. So let's go with text display in edit in text. And that's actually all we need to do. You could put an intermediate Q string here to collect the input, the text of your line edit, and then append that, but it's easy enough to do this. So let's just check if this works. Okay, let's type some in here. Layout world. Fun. See, that works. Okay, so we're almost there. There are some refinements we can do. And one of them we'll put in right here is we'll say edit input. Yeah, okay, this is part of our user-friendly stuff. Tidy up as you go along. Edit input. Set focus. Okay, so now when we process input, it will clear the line edit and it will set focus back to the line edit. So the cursor is in there when the user gets back to there. You don't have to move the cursor around. This text display edit, we could, if we wanted to clear it before we did append. You'll notice if we process multiple times, it'll just keep on adding stuff below it because the pen starts on a new line. So it's optional depending on your usage if you want to clear that beforehand, but we'll leave that for now. And then some other refinements we'll do here is some user-friendly stuff. I'm going to say widgets. Okay, the first thing we'll do, say edit input, set placeholder text into input. Okay, it's not a very useful placeholder, but I'm just demonstrating the use. When you use it, please do things more sensible. And then we'll say edit input, tooltip. Let's say max 30 characters. And then to make that true, we'll say edit input set max length 30. And then if we run it, okay, see now we've got a placeholder there. As I say, you must put something more sensible. And that placeholder goes away if you add anything in there. And it comes back if deleted. And if you hold the cursor over there, you'll see you get your tooltip pops up. And you'll find if you type in here, you won't be able to enter more than 30 characters. It'll be limited to that. I'm not going to do it now, but you can set these tooltips onto your buttons, for example, to explain what the button does, and you can put it on the text edit. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing you must do it user-friendly. Sorry, I just want to show something. See, when we did process now, it cleared the input, and let's put the cursor back there, ready to run. And that is basically that simple little application and how to do it. Any questions or discussion on that? So the layouts, using the layout I've used as one of the simplest layouts, but please do look at the documentation and do look at form layout and particularly grid layout. That's a gentle hint to you. Make sure you know how to use a grid layout. You will be needing it in the not too distant future. but the basic usage is the same. The only difference is that you've got to add a row and a column to it to set it into a specific cell in the grid. So are there no questions on that? So these layouts are not difficult. It's just a matter of practicing. If you write code and do a few layouts, you'll find it just becomes second nature to write them. There's no rocket science about them. It's just a matter of getting used to using them. Okay, are there any questions on that? Or any... Yeah, carry on.
Yes, not from this in particular, but when you declare your pointers, like the buttons or the widgets, you declare them in the class, and when you declared the layout, you declared it here in the setup GUI method.
The reason from that,
I know you. Yes, I know you explained it, but I just want to see the usage of the buttons being declared in the class as opposed to this. I know you said you give them a scope to the class.
Okay, in this particular example, well, in fact, I did. If we look at the constructor, I've accessed the buttons here from the constructor, and I've accessed them in the setup GUI method as well. So I'm accessing the buttons from two different places in the application. I wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't have class scope. That's why they're declared as class members, so they are accessible anywhere in the class. Whereas the layout and the labels, I'm never going to want to access them from anywhere else besides the setup GUI method. I use them once and that's it. But things like buttons and the various text edits and line edits, you will more often than not want to call them from several different methods within your application. So those you give class scope, so they're accessible anywhere, but things that you only use locally within a specific method, you declare them there where you're going to use them. There's no point in cluttering up the class scope with things that are never going to be used in more than one place. Set tab order. Okay, I'll try. In this example, it's not going to achieve anything because we've used a simple box layout, and the tab order is the same as the order you've added to your layout. It's only generally where you use more complex layout types that you might the tab order not going in order. But I'm actually not sure of this offhand, so let's just see how it goes. Okay, set tab order. Okay, let's just put here text SPLA1. Okay, I'm actually quite honestly not totally familiar with this text display. Let's say button close. Okay, I'm not sure if this is going to work. As I say, I must rather look at the documentation. I'm not totally familiar with that set tab order offhand. But let's just see what it does. Okay, if we tab there. Okay, this wasn't a good example. Okay, sorry, I can't do that for you now. I'm not that, I don't remember it offhand, so please look at the documentation. Just as a matter of interest, for those who don't know, if you highlight a class name in Qt and press F1, it takes you straight to the documentation. So if you highlight QWidget and press F1, you'll find a description of the set tab method a tab order method there. But sorry, I can't give you a better explanation now. It's something you're going to have to look up. Anything else? Sorry, what? I can't read this one question. Please show an example of passing an argument to a slot. It's exactly the same as the method. Just remember that a method and a slot are basically the same thing. A slot is just a method that's got sort of superpowers that can be connected to a signal. But otherwise, using arguments with a slot is no different from using it with any other method. But you have to have a signal that has the same argument type and the same number of arguments. So I can't really show it to you offhand because I don't have a signal offhand that takes arguments. But yeah, it's exactly the same as dealing with the method. There's no difference at all. Okay, any other questions or anything about exercise 1 or 2? Nothing. Everyone know exactly how to do this. Everyone coping with the exercises as they 1 and 2 shouldn't be too much of a problem, but if you've got any questions, I can show you some of the code there, but I will be posting the solutions tomorrow. And then I hope you're getting along with exercises 3 and 4. As I tried to say yesterday, I know there's a lot of work there, but guys, please push through. You do need to know that stuff for assignment 1. It will help you, but you really do need to get through exercises 3, 4, and 5 for assignment 1. Okay, recording.
I have a question. Sorry, I have a question. Let's say this was our assignment. Can you show us how do we export it and package it into one file? The easiest way. Because I remember there was a time where some guys left some classes.
Sorry. Can you see that file manager? Okay, what you have to do, is select the files that you want. Sorry, let me do this again. You don't need the pro user file, so you can delete that. Then you select all the files, you right click, and you send to a compressed zip folder, and you call it ASSIGN assignment 1. And there you're done. And that's what you submit. Does that answer your question?
Like in this case, we modified the .pro file, so it's not going to cause problems when you have to.
No, I didn't modify the profile. This exercise 2 is the profile. The file that I deleted was pro user. That just
pro user. Okay. No.
That just holds the configuration, and when your code gets run again, it asks you for the configuration, which the person doing it will set up for their particular computer. So you don't need the pro user file; it just gets in the way. You just the header and source files and your .pro file. That's all you submit. And there you see the zip file. Everything is in there. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Okay, I'm sorry, back to the question about the recordings. Unfortunately, you can't access the recordings directly unless you attended the meeting. So what you have to do is go to the meeting, access the chat, and there's a little share link right up in the top left corner. You click on that and then enter your name or your email address and send it, and that comes through to me, and then I'll grant you access. Unfortunately, that's the way Teams works. We are trying to set up a team for COS3711, but there's over 500 students, and we as users can't do that. The admin has to do that, and trying to get the UNISA IT department to do things at the moment is quite difficult because they are in over their heads with Moodle so far. Downloading the recordings, I'm not totally sure about that. Just Google MS Teams and ask. The expiration date has been set to 28th of February 2023, so there won't be anything expiring anytime soon. Anything else, guys? No questions about the exercises? You're all managing those all right? And handling layouts, no problem. Remember your assignments, you have to code all your layouts. You cannot use Qt Designer. So just make sure you know how to do layouts, and particularly look at form layout and grid layout. You will be needing that. But don't waste time during your assignment period trying to learn things that you should have learned before. Okay, guys, if there's no further questions, then I'm going to end the meeting. Any questions?
Yes, good evening.
Evening.
Yes, I don't know if you mind. Can you just show me the main on your project that we're just doing now? Your main.ccp.
There it is. All you have to do is declare your object and show it. Because we're using a Q widget, you just call the show method of Q widget.
Unfortunately, it's not showing.
Isn't my screen being shared?
No.
No.
Sorry, I'll just try sharing again. Okay, theoretically it should be showing. Is that showing? You should be able to see Qt.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see now.
You can see it.
Okay, then there's a question. Initializing a project, did you make changes to the profile? Yes, I made one little change. I added that second line from the top, Qt plus equals widgets, and that's to turn a console project into a GUI project that you can use widgets. The reason for that is it's far easier to set up a console project. It doesn't carry all the overhead of if you select GUI at the beginning, because you get all those UI pointers and that put into it. It's quite a mission to delete them. So it's easy to start with basically a clean console project and then just make it capable of accepting a GUI. All you would do is add Qt plus equals widgets. And then the other thing I did in main, the default here is Q core application, the include, and then down here you just delete the core part of it, so you end up with Q application. But that's the only changes you have to make. Okay, guys, if any more questions, I thought there might have been some questions about the exercises, but apparently not.
Just one question, sir.
Yes.
Put it on the chart there. It's about the UML that is given, I think, on exercise number 2.
Yes.
To do with the customers.
Yes.
And to say that the UML seems to suggest that there should be only one class. Would it then be marked incorrectly to subclass it and separate the the customer list from the customers as a separate class?
It must be separate.
Sure.
It is a separate class, but you use composition. So the relationship will be a composition relationship.
Correct, yes.
Or in fact, it's aggregation to be strictly correct, but yes. It is a separate class that you implement by itself, and then you use composition to include it.
Yeah, sure. No, I was just wondering because when I looked at the UML, it occurred that it may be a requirement at this stage to create just one class. But thank you for that.
No, you've got to show all the classes and their relationships. That's the whole object of the exercise. And guys, I'm glad the question was asked. Please, UML diagrams are actually quite important. You won't really get questions directly asking what a UML diagram is or does, but questions in the exam are often set by giving you a UML diagram, which you then have to interpret. And you are also occasionally asked to actually draw a UML diagram similar to this exercise. So it is quite important that you do that. And the other thing, please look at the quizzes at the end of the exercises. Those questions aren't just random. They're there specifically to test your understanding and also to draw your attention to specific aspects or things that you should know. I will start posting solutions to those probably tomorrow, but please have a look at them there. There's only 10 questions, but it will help you going through that. As I said, they're there for a reason. It's not just a random sort of quiz. Okay, then I'm going to end there, and then just to remind you that tomorrow, same time, 6 o'clock, we'll be doing the session on libraries and design patterns. And they will be getting into the first part of the syllabus proper, specifically the serializer pattern, and then a little bit of revision of your design patterns from last year, which you need to know a bit about. But then, okay, thanks guys, good night.